I'm honored to be joined today by Umair Zia, who I met in the Buckminster Fuller Institute Design Science Studio, which was a 7-month program that started in the summer of 2020 and went all the way through to the spring of 2021. There were 144 different designers, artists, and amazing people from all over the world. And Umair actually lives in Lahore, Pakistan, where he's a professor of architecture at the National College of Arts. Umair is an architect, author, systems illustrator, and living systems technologist who leads the visualization of complex systems with an emphasis on synergy across scales and disciplines. So thank you so much for taking the time to join me today, and I'm so excited about all the amazing work that you do that we're going to be discussing. So really glad to have you here.
Harlan. Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be on your show. Thank you for having me.
So I guess we're just going to dive right in. And I'm so blown away by Umair's accomplishment of his artistry to communicate all of the work that he's doing that's integrating nature and our built environment. So we're going to start off by just jumping into his website, which of course you'll be able to find the link in the description for this. So here is Umair Zia's website, umairzia.com. We see at the top various different sections that scroll through in the banner, and as you see, his amazing artwork. So we'll scroll right down to the top of the website where you see his 2D art and a link to be able to follow his art on Instagram. So we're going to go now to his Instagram page where you see these incredible drawings of animals, and we'll let Umair describe his art.
Yeah. Thank you, Harlan. So the central sort of premise for almost all of my work is that, how we learn from nature and our technology borrows directly from nature, from our understanding of nature. And the deeper we look into nature, the more advanced our technology becomes. And after Sir Richard Buckminster Fuller's grand thesis on synergy, I realized that what makes nature alive truly is, from synergistic perspective, is the way the innumerable parts and functions, materials, and mechanisms come together synergistically. When all of those processes combine synergistically, the machine becomes alive. So this is a sort of new perspective towards technology. And I believe that we're only truly beginning to understand nature in this post-complexity era. So if you look at this drawing, I study different behaviors and different processes of nature and make these drawings. And I use technology. For example, in this drawing, I use visual references to technology just to highlight the complexity of nature. In this drawing, you see African elephant, and they have a connection with their deceased. They go to their burial sites and they just lower their heads and pay sort of respect to their ancestors. And where the dead body is sort of buried, it decays. The fungi and the mushrooms grow. You see those little mushrooms over there. So it suggests that the lover of this elephant was deceased, and you see she's pregnant, and there's a baby elephant inside her, and there's a complete cycle. And I create these drawings with textures. I use fine architectural pen. If you could zoom in, you would see that there are distinctions. Yeah. Okay. And this, for example, a tiger is like an apex predator, and even a tiger does not overeat or waste food. They try to bury it bury the leftover food in the ground, partly to save it from other animals in the jungle, but also they use it later on. And here we are, human beings who consider themselves at the center of the universe, and we are just wasting the resources that we do not need even. We have so much to learn from them. And this is just one attribute, one behavior that in this majestic animal. Yeah, a polar bear. It was my sort of like a homage, like a tribute almost to this magnificent animal that is going extinct. And there's a reference to the climate change in this drawing. By losing these animals, we are not only losing some distant life forms, we are losing like infinite source of inspiration, for new technology that we can have. In this organism, for example, there's a thick black layer under the bright white fur of a polar bear, and that layer has material properties that retain the body heat inside the organism, and it can change its properties. So it's a complex adaptive system. It can change its strength, and it can perform many functions at the same time. So that layer alone has so many like lessons for us to learn.
That's
And
that's the close-up of that layer where you're studying the actual structure
yeah,
of how this
yeah,
living organism is structured to do these functions, which of course we can start to uh,
that's-
reproduce in the way that we design and build and
yeah,
inhabit the earth in a
yes,
perfectly harmonious
and
living way. And it's just
absolutely.
incredible, your
If
detail and understanding of these structures.
if you look at this drawing, Harlan, this is like this is how I see the cross section of a crocodile. What they do is that they digest stones. So you see how human beings, we balance ourselves on horizontal plane, but crocodiles also sort of balance themselves on the vertical axis, and they fine tune their movement by digesting these stones, and they regurgitate them. So they have like mastered the skill of balancing in the water, and it requires such complex computations. uh like, you know um so that is just again one little aspect. I try to understand these little behaviors, and I try to make these big drawings of those. And just I hope that by looking at all of these drawings, if you go to that ibex, for example, yeah,
Okay.
the one in center, uh, you know, people hunt these ibexes, and they put so much value in their horns, and all of that is just such nonsense. Um, Everywhere in the literature, I found that they use these horns to intimidate their male species and in the fighting and all that. But while making the sketches, I realized that these alpine ibexes can climb on vertical cliffs almost 90 degrees steep, almost like vertical walls, 81 degrees. And with a slight tilt of their head, they have this immense weight on the top. With a slight tilt, they can shift their center of gravity. So I mean, nature doesn't make anything just because it's beautiful, or it makes something so profoundly complex that it becomes beautiful as a byproduct, even almost a byproduct, like an outcome is so beautiful. So it is that so in this drawing, I sort of brought attention to that center of gravity that enables these horns that enable the animal perform its functions. So by losing these animals, and by the way, all these animals are extinct. They're endangered species, marked endangered by WWF. So by losing these animals, we are losing our source of inspiration for technology. So yeah.
Wow. I know, it's so amazing. And I know just this alone, just your inspiration just from animals, you can go on and on, but we're going to move ahead into another section of your art. But just to, and of course, people can come back and find your Instagram to study all these so closely. But now, as you see, we're getting into away from animals and into these huge structures and these videos showing the way that you draw. So please go ahead and explain what's going on here.
Yeah, so I'm an architect by profession, and I found these amazing megastructures of ancient civilizations. This one is pyramid, and there was a time there was a time when all the great minds were studying ways to conserve energy. So this idea of producing energy, conserving it, and now regenerating it, and this idea is an old idea. Human beings have been struggling to master this art of controlling energy. And in this series, I combined those ancient megastructures with the perpetual motion devices that the great minds such as Leonardo da Vinci they had proposed. And if you look at this drawing, you will see how a connection has been established between electromagnetic radiation and light. And I use these technological references just to emphasize, because these lines and these forms, these machines are familiar to the human eye. But we look at the history, when we look at history, we see nostalgic images. We don't see through them. We don't go beyond that. When we look at nature, we easily pass by a tree and we're absorbed in our cell phone, and we consider that advanced technology, but not this. This is another drawing that's Mohenjo-daro in Harappa, Pakistan. They had designed great baths, and I sort of made a cross section of it and revealed this method of recycling water. So again, this is for me, creativity is finding unfamiliar connections between familiar phenomena and familiar objects. So I keep on exploring these new connections, or I try to develop them. So it is in that vacuum, in that absent space, where my meaning is between the perpetual motion devices and the actual history. When I connect them, I hope that it agitates the minds of human beings, because we feel detached from past. We think that even decades ago, people were less advanced, but these ideas have been developing, and we need to know where we're coming from in order to sort of, have some control on the trajectory of the future. So, yeah, that was another series.
And then one more in this series. They're just so incredible. Your detail and most beautiful, imagery of what you're communicating here. So yeah, go ahead and explain what this one is.
Yeah, this is Colosseum, and you will see that pendulum. So whenever there was a sport that requires some kind of scoring, like a record scoring, I sort of made this pendulum. It's a part of the mega structure, and it strikes down this sort of a coin that goes into that hole, and it goes back, and then that's how they've used this. That's how they've used this idea of energy to sort of create a scoring system for them. And I've used actual symbols and drawings from their text in these images. So it's like a collage of different visual references, and in other drawings I connect nature and technology and other static sort of ideas, but I wondered that time is another thing that could be sort of juxtaposed in one drawing, a connection between the past and the present. That's another way of forming those unfamiliar connections. So that was another seed.
So now we're heading through more of your incredible drawings, and I know there's so many that we could stop and talk about, because your references of integrating nature into our built environment, what we as humans build. So that's where we're going to end up, after seeing all these beautiful explorations of these animals and nature. But here, this is obviously not an animal, and yet go and explain what's going on here with this cell phone.
Yeah, so this is a cell phone case, basically. It's like I try to imagine how would nature design a machine, a device through which we could connect, and just focusing on one part of the design, that is like the case, the body of the phone that does not have any electrical circuits going on, just plastic or glass or that kind of thing. And I looked at a bee, honeybee, how it performs one of the most complex maneuvers while landing on the flower. So it would take us like hundreds of those gyroscopes and those devices to perform those kinds of maneuvers and such complex algorithms. And I thought, if nature designed a phone, it wouldn't need those independent parts. It would just design a case in a way that it would have the information and the capacity to change its strength as it falls down. So it would be able to track the geometry of the surface on which it is falling, the speed at which it is falling, and then it would sort of concentrate the molecular strength at those corners that are going to hit first, and it would be a dynamic sort of skin. And that's another thing that we learn in nature, that something very simple as skin is performing multiple tasks. If you look at human skin, even, it's performing multiple tasks. It's sensitive to temperature, sensitive to touch, containing the skeletal system. So it is a complex adaptive system, the truest sense of the word, of the term. So just trying to envision how would nature design these gadgets. And when you come back to the technology that we have, it seems pretty primitive. And that's why I think that, again, we need to look at nature from this new complexity perspective and learn.
There's this one here. This was a really good one with the lung and the analogies that you draw from the lung to other things. So yeah, talk about this one.
Yeah. So again, trying to reveal that that essential invisible from the Little Prince. So how almost all of us are drawn to the trees, and imagine yourself sitting under a tree and you're transported somewhere else, and you're thinking and you feel good, your feelings, your thought process, all of that. I envision that who's to say that the cells that are flowing through our lungs, they do not have dreams and aspirations, and they do not have the thought process that we have when we go near a tree? Just because we have a brain to process it, if one thing that complexity has taught us is that the fewer dedicated parts you have in order to perform more and more functions, so the fewer parts and the more functions that they perform, the more complex your system is. And by that logic, trees are more complex and more advanced than human beings. Human beings still have these dedicated organs. So who's to say that the cells moving through these bronchial branches do not have the same feelings that we have when we go near the tree? And that's a very sort of unsettling kind of perspective. unsettling but grand, because I think that is like a first step for me to start this grand synchronicity with the rest of the nature. We One thing, when I study nature, and when I say I study nature, I don't look at an organism and try to draw the beauty of it. I try to see as many processes that I can understand as I can understand. And so when I study nature, I realize that we human beings are full of resistance, and we haven't really opened up our faculties. We haven't embraced ourselves as part of the nature. And for example, um, uh, look at human language even, we attribute this to all the technological advancements, our ability to communicate and design these complex things. And again, if we had a great clarity of things, we would need fewer words to communicate, and keep on increasing the level of understanding and wisdom and knowledge, and the less and less words we would need to communicate. And this is another another indicator that the rest of the nature is far more advanced. It's the way it's keeping the balance. So yeah, I love your show because you talk about this, you give us an idea of new perspective, new earth, and it's like the beginning of some new era. And I can relate with it, because one thing that I've understood, I've realized, is that we are at the cusp, we are at the end, at the death of the empirical sciences, the cause and effect relationship, and we're beginning to move to a new sort of consciousness, new awareness, where there is a big space for human intuition in the sciences. And how do you make scientific frameworks around human intuition? So in order to advance in that direction, I think art is a profound tool. So yeah, I'm sorry, just blabbering on, but
just that the whole point you were making was a very Buckminster Fuller concept of to be able to do more with less. And he would say that ultimately you'll be able to do everything with nothing, but that's an extreme form of it. But it's true, this whole idea that nature is able to do more with less. And, in human design, we can, see that principle and embody it more and more. And in that, the lung also looks like trees. And there's even it's been said that the rainforest and the trees are the lungs of the earth, and how they interact with it. And also just that whole branching of inside the lungs is how we can integrate nature and wilderness into the human environment. Like in my vision of terraquaforming, where we start to bring the water and the earth together, but it's not just water and the earth, but it's the wilderness, it's nature, all the animals that come with it, and then human habitation, and have these all integrate more and more seamlessly to become one, as opposed to like wilderness, nature's there, human civilization's here.
Yeah, I mean, let me put this in another way before we move on. One of the most exciting discoveries about DNA was that, if in simple words, if you wanted to understand the meaning or the idea of a DNA, you would have to, the only place where you could find that was the physical construct of that thing. And if we say that the ideas of the things are in their physical sort of configuration, in the structures of those things, then look at the structure of the lung, look at the architecture of the lungs, and then look at the architecture of the trees and those rivers and those mountains and all that. And you know, you start seeing uniform, you start seeing some connection. And so yeah, so what you're saying, I think it's not just like a beautiful way of looking at nature. It's I think we are beginning to understand that it is a reliable sort of way of looking at it. It's like a good foundation to build our ideas upon. And yeah. So
Okay, so let's go back to more of your work. We're going to jump back to your website. Here we are in your 2D art, and we're going down now through this is super exciting because this is your project that you worked on in the Design Science Studio, and it's about to be published. Your book called Tree Tech: 50 Lessons for Humanity. And of course, there will be a link directly to be able to purchase this book. It's imminently coming out, and maybe by the time you listen to this, it will be out and available. So the Amazon link will be available. And we're going to go back into your Instagram where you show a lot of the drawings, like that last one of the lung. But here, this is one of the most amazing with the seed.
Yeah, so this one is a flying seed, and what you learn from it. So when I look at it, you see, human beings, when we fall in love with another person, it is almost always conditional because it depends on their response of how we feel, and how they. So it's all just conditional and tied up to their feelings and all that. But if you look at the way a tree disperses of these flying seeds all over an area, vast expanse of area, the rivers and the meadows, and it's like a love letter. This flying seed, I've drawn a mechanical heart inside the tree. It's like a love letter, and an unconditional love letter that you don't have to reciprocate my feelings. It's just for you. And this is just like one lesson from the way of the trees. And it's a profound lesson, really, because if we really want to understand nature and ourselves, then we will need to really observe, and we would need to at least temporarily we would need to imagine that trees are intelligent beings, and they are doing it with purpose. They are quiet on purpose, and they are communicating. Only recently we're starting to see the complex, highly intelligent networks of these mycelial formations. We're only beginning to understand that. So this was again the idea of the sound. How I mentioned language. We take pride in it, but animals and birds make sounds, and by that logic of fewer agencies, fewer elements with maximum impact, by that logic, trees, animals and birds are wiser than human beings. They're making noise all the time, and we have no idea that it's also a form of energy that we're just. And trees are just quiet, and they're all wise, and they're just there's so much to learn from them. So
this cross section of the tree is so incredible. And then this one really caught my attention, which anyway, it's the cross. It took me a second to understand, but the cross section of a little piece of a leaf, and it's just so incredible. The structure and
Yes.
understand.
You see, as an architect, when I look at the city, initially I thought that politics drove cities, and then I thought that some other development drove cities, and eventually I realized it was just pure greed, and And if you look at the city, I believe that it is one of the most advanced human invention, a city. And still there are so many lapses in it, and all the homelessness and all the dead ends and lapses in the distribution of the resources in a city. Again, if you look at a tree, the way the resources are distributed from one end from the tip of the root all the way to the tip of the tree, and how they use sun, the heliotropism, and the photosynthesis. This one is particularly photosynthesis. These cells and the architecture, it's inspired by those cells that we used to draw in our school. How trees depend on sun and utilize that energy, and how it distributes its resources all across its architecture. It's far more efficient than the working of a city, the most advanced city even. And
Yeah.
and this drawing was, I call it a sparrow on a snag. And we've invented the idea of naming things. We name things and we name ourselves, and then we want our names to live longer than our actual lifespan. We want to live on like that. We make, our own portraits and whatnot. And that's our idea of convoluted idea of naming. Trees don't name themselves, but they actually live larger than their lives. So a tree remains conducive to life long after it's dead. Not, I shouldn't say it, because it's he or she or they die long after they die. So, and here's a lesson for us. And they are actually unique. They are actually different in their own way. And when I say unique in their ideas, I mean that their ideas are unique because their physical construct, their architecture is unique. That's what we've learned from the structure of DNA. So their ideas are unique, and still they're not bothered by, those superficial things. So another lesson for us that, the living matter the most. And then that's how, we can, if there's a, but we don't live larger than life. It's an illusion we've created around ourselves. So we need to sort of shed off a lot of things that we've created, and we need to sort of embrace new ways of living with the rest of the life forms and the rest of the nature. So just another lesson that we can learn from trees. It's from the book.
I know. I'm so excited. I can't wait for it to finally come out and be able to get a copy of it. So yeah, that's really great that it's very close, and just amazing to see, the process here on Instagram of how you create these and insight glimpse to it. So go back to your website. We'll continue going on down. Of course, this section, you're working on some games, which was a whole nother tangent. But here we're going to come to the spatial design, which, of course, this is the image that you have behind you. And I just love this one so much because there's this huge tree off to the side, and then, over, integrating into this incredible structure that you're envisioning. So we're going to jump into your whole section of your website. We're down at the bottom of it, because this is the first work that I encountered when I met you that just completely felt such a strong connection, that we have these such huge overlapping interests on how we can create the architecture of the new Earth. So here, I'm going to slowly scroll through this, and you tell me when to stop so you can describe what we're looking at.
Yeah. So this one, these are different projects that these are competition entries, and I published the research in journals. You will find all those references. For example, the first one that you're looking at, it was inspired by craft making, and we were at NCA, National College of Arts. It was basically a sort of a place for all the craftsmen of India. It was originally a Muse School of Arts. And during the arts and crafts movement, we got together, and while you're making these crafts, you know, at that time, one sort of one line uh, um, determines the next one, and in that process of growing your pattern, you are actually expressing a fractal of your own fractal expression of yourself. And so in that sense, it's just pure and it's untainted by all the big artist names and those kinds of things. It's that's how craftsmen work. So there's a lot of noise in Karachi, and I came across this sort of phenomenal like idea in physics. It's called acoustic levitation, and you can actually
Oh, is that this one or this one here? This is the acoustic levitation, right?
The other one, or
this one?
There's the one below it. There's a little lag in the scrolling side.
Yeah. I know. Okay. So you have acoustic levitation, which is something in my book, I talk a little bit about that in my chapter on sound. So go ahead.
So you see, I studied that process, and I envision a habitat suspended in thin air for Karachi. Obviously, we do not have the resources to create such a skyscraper. I mean, even more developed countries wouldn't experiment with that. But that was not the idea, because that was the whole. For me, the idea was to really just agitate the minds of my students and fellow architects. That the idea was to focus on a natural principle. The physics is natural sciences, so acoustic levitation is a natural phenomenon. So just understand building as a system. Said that was the idea. So these parts, and so what happens is that when you design a structure like this, then new problems evolve. Then you morph and change your design, adapt it, and transform it to sort of solve new problems. Unless you do this, you would never find new problems. So in this problem, for example, there was a big issue of vertical circulation, and I made this bridge that sort of retracts and opens up, and I had to solve this whole idea. And this whole this geodesic sphere, it's obviously Buckminster Fuller's.
And of course, Buckminster Fuller had the concept that if you made a geodesic sphere big enough, it would contain enough hot air that the whole thing could float with the whole city inside also. Through the thermodynamics of it like a balloon. And it didn't even need to have a membrane like a balloon, because enough hot air inside would cause the whole thing to be lighter than air.
You see, Harlan, the thing is that when we are building architecture from brick and mortar perspective, then the way the forces are distributed to the ground is different. We are within a certain framework. All our problems and questions and solutions are within that. What Buckminster Fuller does is that he just replaces the whole system, the whole framework. It puts you in a system where the load is distributed within a structure. So a geodesic sphere does not have a foundation. It distributes its own loads in itself. And that sort of idea is not limited to the sort of envelope of the building. Then you must think within that framework, and new possibilities emerge. And what you're saying is one of the great possibilities, where you have literally maximum space with minimum architectural intervention.
Right, yeah. Here, I scrolled down a little bit, but here's just an amazing concept. The asymmetrical load distribution, a skyscraper inspired by the biomechanics of a human body. And
Yeah.
incredible.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it was a simple thing. I was looking at this wrestling match and I was looking at these movements. By the way, Santiago Calatrava has worked a lot on this, and I studied his work thoroughly. And I was looking at this match and I realized that, it's just amazing how human body can stay at balance in so many different postures. And I thought that this idea alone can open up architectural like immense architectural exploration. And when I designed this sort of asymmetrical distribution of load, then new possibilities emerged. Then those hollow concrete columns could be the vertical circulation membrane, so that would then require new kind of transportation system. And this was and the site was also important in this project because we have this huge sports complex that is not being used. So I thought that I could take I could identify all those structural anchors and then sort of grow from there and develop a central trunk instead of just like erasing the whole thing clean and then laying down the piles and do that. So that's how you gradually distribute load, spread out your load on a larger footprint. So this project was finalist in the CTBUH competition. Peter Cook was one of the jurors in this competition. It was great honor for me. And their main reason was that I had not installed like glass envelope or some kind of skin around that structure. So that's why it was a runner-up and not the winner. So that was great. Yeah, this was another project, Harlan. So in this project, the brief was that we had to design a pod that could remain aloft for a month, and then it could be submerged for a month, and it could attach itself to a cliff for a month, the same pod, and it had to generate its own energy, and it had to sort of support two researchers. So I looked at different mechanisms in nature. You could see, if you can zoom in this page, is it possible?
I don't know. I guess.
Okay. Oh yeah, don't worry.
Yeah.
Okay, so if anyone would like to have a closer look, please check it out on the website. So if you look at the left side of this drawing, you'll see a lizard and its adhesive mechanism. So this was my first project in which I truly experienced the need for synergy, because I solved all these problems independently, and then I combined them, and then the nature was left behind, and then it was just finding that synergistic integration of independent systems. And I came up with this idea that is somewhat like a daffodil, like a dandelion, that sort of glides it captures, it develops pockets of air to reduce its weight, and then it sort of floats in thin air and just goes to distance. So I designed layers of such things, and this little this main structure, this is all just these platelets like planes are all just there to capture air. They would rotate at enormous speed, and there's a tiny pod inside that structure, and then there were rolling balls, so that would create energy, and that energy would another form of that energy would be heat. So heat would add to that lightness of the structure, so it would remain suspended in air. So when it's rotating, your energy is being produced and it's traveling, and all these things are happening. I had not planned this. When I combined these technologies, these new possibilities started emerging. And then
right?
Yeah.
All right. Oh my God. So like I said, that whole section of the website is incredible. We're going back now to finish off going through the website. This, of course, your nature gadgets, which is more of your work that you're developing about all these different small scale, like industrial design, all
Yeah.
based on natural systems. And then this final section of the website, your nature inspiration, and all these
Yeah.
incredible people, and the nature tutor. So you have this section which you have a little quote. I just want to read that. Not everyone has the drive or clarity to learn from the complex processes of nature and to apply that knowledge directly. In my teaching experience, however, I observed that almost all students took inspiration from the work of other artists. Therefore, I started building upon an archive of all the observant visionaries, nature tutors, who teach us through their own genius, creativity, and their deep understanding of nature. These case studies provide inspiration to students, particularly in the early stages of their art, design, science projects. This initiative will always be free. So with that end, you have a whole nother website called Nature Tutor.
Yeah.
Now, of course, both of us were hugely inspired by Buckminster Fuller. He could be one of the greatest nature tutors that we know about, and being introduced to his work and his books and stuff. But here you go deep and you really explore so many incredible people. So talk about your Nature Tutor website and how
Yeah.
you can access this.
So the idea was, Harlan, that so anyone could just visit the website and just search what they're looking for. So if you're inspired by mountains or earth phenomena, water, flowers, you could just type that in, search, look it up, and you would find some references, books, music, movies, documentaries, films, art. And that's just a gateway for me, because I notice that people don't know where to start from. They are inspired by it and they don't know that. And then each one of these masterpieces are complete source of inspiration, and you could take it any direction from there onwards. So that was one way to navigate through this website. And another way was just that those tabs on the top. So if you wanted to look at art, click on the artist at the front.
That one works. I clicked on music though, and that worked.
Yeah.
And then and yet, like I said, I think this in some ways is such an important aspect of the work you're doing, the work I'm doing, is to be able to not only teach about what we've learned and our own expertise as artists, but to share this resource, because like we both went to art school, right? And I think the most important thing that I learned in art school is to learn about what other people have done, because as an artist, you may be super creative and come up with something that you think you just invented, and then someone comes along and goes, so-and-so spent their whole life doing what you just did. You're not original. So it really makes sense as an artist to learn about what other people have already done, so you don't have to, as they say, reinvent the wheel. And then you can add your own artistry and creativity to that, rather than repeating what's already been done. So it's really important to have a resource like that, so that we don't, just do something thinking that we came up with it, and then you find out that someone has spent their whole life doing it. So, and then I just love your, of course, you are a professional speaker, but besides an artist, where you go and present on your work, which you're accessible and to be booked and accessed through it. And here at the very end of your website, you very concisely just show everything all in one place, so that you can see, the access to your tree tech and, nature gadgets, which is coming up, the nature tutor, everything all in one place. So beautiful, such a well done, such an easily accessible website to access all of this. So, I guess, we've talked about a lot of things, and I just love to have you sum it up, synthesize it into one synergetic finale for the people who've been joining us today on this talk. So honored to have you.
Thank you. You want me to sort of summarize it?
Sure. Why not? Your closing word. Any last thoughts that you didn't get to mention that we didn't cover, or just how you see, moving ahead with all of your work, and how, mostly, like, obviously the most important thing about all of this, what we both are dreaming about, is that all of humanity wakes up to this level of consciousness that is completely tuned to nature and seeing everything as sacred and in harmony. And that's what, all of your work is doing. And, you spend so much time learning and studying about the biology of living systems and of trees, but also, being an architect, understanding how we actually use materials and build things from our current practical Western way. And then, bridging this to bring it all together into one new vision and one new way. That, it really is a radical shift that's taking place right
Yeah.
now, and not an easy one, because the current system is so ingrained. And yet here you are, a professor of architecture at this large university school in a large city in Pakistan, dealing with the real world, and yet starting to introduce this way that it will become hopefully normal in this new earth that we're creating right now, and I think a lot sooner than because we need to. We're at a crux right now, and so yeah, if you want to just share your
Yeah.
thoughts about what you're doing and how we're moving ahead to make this a reality.
Harlan, I think that the ultimate guide for us in becoming the best version of ourselves and really excelling at what we do. And it's important that we excel and we utilize our potential. I think the biggest guide for us in that is our heart. We must start listening to our intuition. We must rely on our instinct. That is something that is unfortunately that's something that we discourage in schools. We want logic, we want reason. Even in art school, I am like, people usually tell me that my expertise is architectural argument, like, and that is something that
No.
it's actually and that is also one common ground that brings all of us to this one sort of place where we can begin again, start over. But this time around, when we learn from nature, it will be different than how it happened the first time, because now we have covered this whole linear, this whole era of linear thinking. We have created excellent things during this time, but we must rely on our intuition. And for anyone who wishes to explore nature, I think the best starting point is the study of Buckminster Fuller's work, Synergistics. Synergistics, his book. I love that book. Start from there, go deeper into complexity. You will see that complexity sciences, fractals, emergence, all those processes, you will find great similarity in Fuller's work, different interpretation, and you will start seeing why good art is good. Why does it touch you? Why does it have an impact greater than its, all the elements of art? Why some music touches you? Why some mathematical equation is so great? And so you will start seeing similarities in all of that. But that worked for me, I think. I don't know, that's why I made nature tutor, because something else might work for someone else. So yeah, just believe in your instinct. I think that is very important.
So
Believe in your instinct.
right, and you started off by saying, though, and you only said it once, believe in your heart, and then you shifted to much more logical terms like your instinct or your intuition, that fits much more with the, being in the mind. And then you said, though, a lot of times, though, we're caught up in having to be too logical, too rigid in the mind, and it is really connecting to the heart, which is really important. And even when we went through that whole Design Science Studio, design and science, they're both very head-centered things, but we really did focus a lot on connecting to the heart. And I think that's a real key. And like you say, intuition and instinct are more heart-centered than they are head-centered. Yes, did you want to comment on that?
Yes, absolutely. You see, so I would say that there are 3 levels of knowledge. And the first level is perception, bodily perception, what we see, what we hear, and all that. That's how we get knowledge. The other is reason, that linear era that I referred to, like thinking and logic and all of that. And the highest level of knowledge for me is then instinct, that is informed instinct, that is above just reason. And it's informed because it's not, it's not just, I mean, do you ever, if you go to a place where you feel like something is off, or you meet a person that gives a certain vibe and you feel it without ever talking to them? So we have all of this inside of us. And how to cultivate those faculties, how to become, greater than ourselves, in a synergistic way. So that's very important, and you're right. So instinct and intuition are definitely like something that we must find ways to harness and cultivate. And it would definitely require that reflection and that centering, and connection to nature will also help us, because and once we learn from nature, and when we're centered like that, our idea of technology will be different, I think.
And you use the word instinct, and wild animals are born, and without very much time, they learn to function very, very well and very intelligently through instinct. Whereas humans don't have as much ingrained instinct. We have to be trained and learn, and we're kind of helpless. But what came to mind is that incredible documentary, My Octopus Teacher, where this guy goes and lives with an octopus for a year, and the octopus isn't that old. It only lives for a year or two lifespan, and yet its level of intelligence that it exhibits through its instinct, the way it interacts with its environment, and that documentary is just so important. A way of the type of work that you do, Umair. And it looks like we actually lost you on the Zoom, but we did pretty much come to the end of it. So I suppose we're just going to wrap up with that point, that we do need to turn into our own innate instinct and intelligence. So we thank you all for joining us today here for this. And of course, a like and share so that we can get this out there to more people. And we'll see you on the next portal to the new earth.